Well, doctors and scientists across the nation are working hard to find medicines to help patients with COVID-19 and, of course, eventually a vaccine. Joining us now via Skype to talk more about this from the Salk Institute is Dr. Greg Lemke. Dr. Lemke, thank you for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
You know, we are hearing a lot about how researchers are working on finding a cure, which is super exciting to hear about. But, you know, most of us don't know what that process looks like. So can you kind of walk us through some basic steps in what these researchers are doing to find a cure and a vaccine?
Right. So those are basically two separate things. The cure are things that are devoted towards people who are already sick and who are, in need of some immediate attention to the virus. So people are working on several different approaches to that. Most of these relate to trying to stop the growth of the virus inside cells in our body. So one of the approaches that's taken, for example, is an approach that's based on other strategies to target viruses, which targets replication of the virus genome. So the virus is encoded by a small RNA. It has to copy that RNA in order to make more viruses. And we have some potential approaches of drugs that block the enzyme that copy that RNA. So you may have heard about one that's been in the news the last few days. It's a drug called remdesivir that's made by Gilead. It was originally developed to target other viruses, including Ebola virus, but now it's being tried out for patients. And the idea is this just would inhibit the growth of the virus inside cells. So that's one approach to treatment. The second approach is, of course, the one you mentioned, which is really the ultimate approach, which is to develop a vaccine which would prevent people from getting sick in the first place.
All right, so at what point do researchers decide this vaccine is looking promising and it's going to go into testing and then eventually human testing? I mean, what's the level of success that it must meet before they go to that level?
Well, the first thing you got to do is to make sure the vaccine is safe. So they do a bunch of trials of just injecting potential vaccines into patient populations to make sure that there are no adverse effects. And then the second thing you really assay for is the production in those patients that you've introduced the vaccine to, the production of antibodies to proteins on the virus that you want to block. So the best known of these is a protein called the spike protein, which is on the surface of the virus. It's this thing that's sort of depicted as red blobs in all the diagrams. If you make antibodies to that protein, you block the ability of that protein to bind to the receptor on cells, and so you block the ability of the virus to infect. So that's the first thing you check at a vaccine. And then you check to see how much of that you make, and ultimately, you test this in a large number of people to see whether or not it affects in the population at large the development of disease.
So with all this, what's the timeline that you would give a potential vaccine for COVID-19?
Well, if everything goes really, really well, we're looking at about a year. That is, if everything goes perfectly, optimally, the initial vaccines that people are trying work extremely well, we're looking at about a year. If there are any hiccups in that process, it's going to be longer than that, anywhere from another 6 to 12 months. I think with the number of people who are working on this and the number of different strategies they're trying for the development of the vaccine, I'm reasonably optimistic that we can meet it by that 2-year time frame. But anything sooner than a year is really not in the cards.
Dr. Lemke, I really appreciate you sharing some of your knowledge with us, because now we're all kind of pretending to be scientists these days, trying to figure out what this is and where we go from there. So be well, and I look forward to talking to you in the near future.
Thank you very much, Ginger. Take care.
You too.